What if there could be more connection when it comes to the design of your legacy? I'd like to welcome Haleh to the Design Your Legacy podcast this lovely morning. Welcome, Haleh.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
It is my pleasure. It is my privilege. And you're joining today from Los Angeles. I think it's the Marina Del Rey or the Playa Del Rey area.
Yeah, our studio's in Playa Vista.
Oh, wonderful. I know that you've got an advertising background, but would you share a little bit with the listeners about how you've come to this point with your business? I know it's been expanding, guarding office space. What's the backstory?
Yeah, I own a photo and video actually. We archive family and institutional memories. And the backstory is that I'm Iranian, and my family found themselves in the 1979 Iranian Revolution. And they didn't really take it seriously in the very beginning until the hostages were taken. And then they knew that this is going to be a lot bigger than what they had anticipated. So they weren't really able to take much with them out of the country except the photo albums. And then I found myself in my mid 20s wondering, who are these people in these albums? Like, I didn't know who my dad's, uncles were, and so I started to get to know my family members through these photos. And since I worked in advertising, there was a lot of ebbs and flows, and I would take the photos into our studio and I would start essentially scanning them at very high resolution because it was available to me. And so I understood the technology aspect of archiving, but then I started to really understand the stories. That's really what was the driving factor, was the stories, to understand who these people are and where do I come from, etc.
Yeah, that's absolutely lovely. And to provide some context also, when you were in advertising before, you worked with some pretty big name brands. Like, I think your background includes Apple, Land Rover. What are some of the other brands?
Sony PlayStation, Infinity. I worked on a lot of car accounts because the Los Angeles advertising world has all the cars are here. I did Ritz-Carlton. I did a really interesting campaign for Ritz-Carlton. But really my favorite thing that I did was I launched iPad Mini globally by myself. I was the head of that campaign and I had 56 people. We had 2 months and about 2 weeks, maybe a little less, to do the whole campaign globally. And it was really fun. It was really a joy to work on. And back in 2012.
Yes, yes, very cool. So I know that one of the things you mentioned in prior podcasts is that you went to a life coach, and that was when you really discovered that you loved photographs. Would you share a little bit about that backstory also?
Well, the life coaching really led me. I really wanted to do my own business. I wanted to sort of use my knowledge that I had learned in working in advertising for 27 years and really use the technical knowledge and somehow marry it with my love of family storytelling. And that's when I worked with a coach and she kept asking me, like, what do you really love doing? And it really, the net of the net was that I just love working with family photos and I really enjoy making things from it. Every year I make a family calendar for my family. Excuse me. And and now, of course, we make a lot of things for our families, our clients, namely photo books. We have many clients who like legacy photo books of the older photos. They make year-end photo books. So that was sort of my heart way into designing a business that really fit my heart and my technical expertise. So and that's what came of me working with Andrea Quinn, my life coach.
Very cool, very cool. So let's start with the problem. And the problem I would think is a lot of times people might be overwhelmed. They've got hundreds or thousands of photos. And I know that in some of your prior podcasts, you talked about the technical aspects, but I kind of want to focus on the emotional ones in our conversation today, because we could talk about how you can delete duplicates and so forth. But where is it really that when somebody comes to you at the very beginning, is it that they're overwhelmed with stress? Is it that they don't know where to start? Where do you normally take a client from A to Z, and where's that starting point of A?
That's a really excellent question. And it's really the overwhelm of what do we do? Like, what do we do with all these boxes that I've inherited or that I've amassed? That's essentially that's where a lot of our clients start. They have so much anxiety around doing, making sure that their photographs and their memories in general are stored properly, because it's kind of always falls into the someday pile. I will get to that someday. But as we were talking about this earlier, you actually right now have a fire right around the corner from where you're recording, right? And that is scary. That's scary to think about. Oh, you could replace, I mean, God forbid, I hope nothing happens and it doesn't get near you, but you could replace your house, you could replace your furniture, but you can't replace your memories. You can't replace that one and only photograph you may have of your great grandmother. So, and when people start to learn about that there is a service that can help them, that's when they sort of sigh a relief to understand that, okay, it doesn't need to stay in the someday pile. We can hire someone to actually organize and curate and help us archive our memories. But it's really not knowing where to start and not knowing how to store them. That's those two things, really. I get a
Yeah.
lot of phone calls about that.
Yes, and I imagine also probably one of the outcomes also is that when people initially start, they don't understand perhaps the true value. And then when you present the finished product, I can only imagine that they then it just hits them like, wow, like truly the value of setting aside the time and the resources to do a photo project. What say you?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. It doesn't take a lot of time on my clients' ends. I know a lot of people think, well, how is she going to know who anyone is or what decade or year these photos are from? You know, um, I've been doing this for 8 years, and we've developed so many different techniques in identifying sort of the date. And that is the most important in our organization process, because we make sure everything is ordered in a chronological way before we scan everything, because once we scan it, we make sure that the files are renamed and redated so that our clients can easily find what they're looking for. And they can easily go into the 1940s and see those photographs. And, photographs have a lot of clues in them, whether it's the type of photograph it is, or the shape that it is, or how it was developed. I have extensive knowledge of being able to identify, well, those are from the 20s because it looks like that. And of course, the subject matters also give away a lot of the clues, the cars in the photographs, the outfits, the hats. I can go on and on. The hardest for us is really identifying photographs from the 80s and 90s, because all the big hairdos and all the lapels that we all wore in the 80s and 90s, they all kind of mesh in together. But and that's when we started to take a lot of photos, and we were actually, those 2 decades presented a lot of overwhelm because of the sheer quantity of how many duplicates we could get for essentially free or 1 cent.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to circle back again to the benefits. I know that when we chatted about the intention for today's episode, we talked about the idea of connection. So,
Mhm.
in addition to connection, what are some of the other benefits that you have seen when it comes to your clients?
Yeah, I mean, really, I always say the four things you can't replace in life are the people in your life, your pets, your time, and your memories. So knowing that, you know, that is safe, it's just one less thing to really worry about. And I love that, you include these types of topics in your conversation, because I know wealth management is super important. And and I'm so glad that wealth managers are now starting to talk about everything, all the different assets in our clients' lives, right? And this is one asset that you really cannot replace. I mean, the stock market goes up and it goes down. Hopefully, it goes up and up and up over the years, and we've seen that. But replacing your memories is impossible. There's no way of replacing them.
Yes.
So, yeah.
I I would think it would also strengthen the relationship of everybody in the room, whether that's the family of origin, the extended family. even friendships, business associates, because when that gets reflected back to that individual, it's like, wow, I never saw it like that before.
Yeah, I mean, I think as human beings, we are wired to really want to know where we come from, especially when we're a little bit older. I mean, if you ask a teenager or maybe someone in their 20s, they may not necessarily be in that headspace of caring about stuff like that. And of course, I'm generalizing. I'm sure there's many teenagers who really are really interested in knowing who their great grandparents were. But in general, we see that when people started to get a little older and they start to have their own family is when they really are thinking about passing on that legacy. And I say this, but I have many clients who don't have children, and they have completely invested in making sure their legacy is archived so that they can pass it on to their nieces and nephews. So yeah, I mean, that connection is so important. Um, I advise and coach many of my clients to actually enlist the help of the elders in the family so that they can start talking about who these people were and so that we can record the stories. And it's really wonderful.
Yes. Thank you for touching upon that idea of wealth managers now talking about the softer side, because there is a loneliness epidemic that is happening. And also, there's about 31 trillion that's about to be passed from the elders and the senior generation to the next gens coming up, the rising generation. And so, when we talk about this idea of connection, people, absolutely, like you had said, they need to know their roots, but they also need to know that there's more than just money.
Yes, exactly. That's right.
Yeah, yeah. So your family left with the shirts on their back and two suitcases of photos. What does a photo mean to your clients?
It means their family story. It's their history. I only have two photos of my grandfather, my dad's dad. My grandfather died when my dad was 18, and um, they're yeah, I mean, and so those two photos are so important to me. Um, it's connection to the past. It's I can take a look in his eyes and see that, oh my gosh, my brother has his eyes, you know. It's just it's everything. To me, it's everything,
Yes,
honestly.
very nice. One of the things that I had shared with you in our icebreaker conversation was during COVID, I had interviewed my parents for 10 or 11 hours, an hour a day, obviously not at one sitting. And the most important thing was to go through the photos that I took with my iPhone of like they had maybe 10 photo albums collected over the years. And my father's side of the family, he's a 12th generation American, they had preserved everything. My mother's side didn't, but I was not interested in their furniture. I wasn't interested in their carpets and their rugs and the antiques. I just wanted the photos. Like my sister can take the rest. I just wanted, like you had said, that was what I was curious about. That's what I wanted to take forward, not necessarily the materialism aspect of the personal property.
That's right. I mean,
Because
because those things can be, you can buy those things. I know. I mean, of course, like if there's a special piece of furniture that's been passed down for generations, of course, that's really important. But but you can always buy a replica of it or have it made, or you know, um, it's the photos, and now nobody has to fight over the photos anymore. We can archive it, and our the way we archive is through the standards of the Library of Congress. So it's the absolute highest quality possible. And then they can print it, they can make photo books with it. Everyone can have access to it.
it's lovely. I think it's what I call the glue or the Velcro of the universe that brings people together. Because
That's
again, when we're talking about affluent families, there's not only that aspect of access to resources, but there's also the pressure that they live under. And so to be able to have that quality of life and that meaning, it makes the headaches worth it of the
that's
day in and day out and having to deal with all of the challenges that come with money. Sometimes people think, oh, well, if life becomes easier with money, and sometimes it can, but other times not always. And so this is the substance of the love that they can see when all the photos come together. So one of the things you said in prior podcasts is emotions come up with each photo, and then there's the organizational bit. Would you talk about some of the emotions that can come up?
I mean, yeah, there. there's so much bittersweet in our photos because it's our life. The human experience is bittersweet. You know, some of my clients have lost children, which is the absolute worst thing that can ever happen to you. So it's really difficult for them to be able to navigate through those photos. And, and I have so much experience in this, so we can really navigate the emotional aspects of it, but mostly a lot of the photographs strike joy. It's from their kids' childhood, it's from the family, from their own childhood, from the family vacations that they took,
Socializing, breaking bread, parties.
socializing, holidays. Yeah, breaking bread. Yeah, absolutely. I had a client who had a ginormous box of slides. Actually, many of our clients do. But these slides held the photographs of her mother who passed away way before she was married. And so her kids in my office, her kids were able to see the photographs for the first time, the photographs of their grandmother. And they, and of course these kids were in their early 20s, and they just started crying. Like I had film of their grandmother, and at her engagement to their grandfather, and it was just such a joy to be able to just see the way she moved and what she looked like and how she ate. She was eating cake. It's just incredible to be able to just see your past and reflect your own selves in your ancestors.
Yeah, I think it's a beautiful thing. And when that positive mirroring is there, the depth of happiness and connection. So, since this is a legacy podcast, what does this word mean to you?
We were actually talking about this with some friends the other day. She asked me, what does it mean to you what do you want to leave for 7 generations from now? And I thought that was really deep for me to think about 7 generations. What does that mean? And really what the first word that came to mind was love. I just want 7 generations from now to be filled with love. And I know that can sound hippie trippy, but I'm almost 55, and I just feel like at this point in our lives, if everyone sort of held that near their heart and filled their life with love, things might be a little bit easier out there. And so that's my hope, that's my wish. And I just wish for people, especially for my clients, to be able to build their lives with knowing that they come from love, hopefully that they come from love.
Oh, that's tenderhearted. Thank you for sharing. I know one of the things that you've also talked about in prior podcasts is working with teenagers who are facing hard times and being able to come up with an anthology of their high school experience because they're entering a world right now where they need to have that grounded foundation, a rock of some sorts.
Yeah, I just did a graduation book from 0 to 18 of my client's daughter. And she just had such a tough time during COVID. She missed her 8th grade graduation. She missed her high school graduation. She was experiencing eating disorder because she wasn't able to connect. And it's just so hard. And my client called me and said, you will not believe how happy she was to look through this. We had photographs of her being born, essentially, all the way to 18. And all of that could fit in one album. Like, it is possible to do an anthology of your kid's, life. Obviously, not if the kid is 70. but it's just, it's really empowering to know that you come from love, that you were born into love, that you're loved by your parents, and that you could create that for yourself, even though it's hard as teenagers. Everything's black and white, and we need friends, we need that connection, right? But knowing that you can create that, and you come from that is really empowering.
Absolutely. I think a lot of times also for young people like teenagers, they live very much in the moment. And so to have that bigger picture, that 5,000-foot view, redirects their energy from, like you had shared, she went from having an eating disorder to looking at her life differently compared to a place of self-destruction because she didn't know what to do with that energy, that frustration that's
Yeah.
happening across the board with young people these days. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
What three or four top core values would you say influence you today as you're developing your life and designing your own legacy?
Oh, I love that question. Connection. I think that's, I thrive and live for connection. I am connection. I'm an organic connector of things and people. Um, Loyalty to, I'm fiercely loyal to my family, to my employees, to my friends. Um, Creativity, I think that is something that I thrive on. Um, yeah, I just love it. I love being creative. I love being strategic in my business. When I started this business, all I wanted to do was photo books. And then my clients were like, but what about all these old photos? And I thought, okay, I need to pivot. I need to learn about how to handle older media. I already knew how to scan it because we had scanners and that wasn't a problem. I had that experience. But, being open to the shifts that come your way, either personally or in your business. So I did. I had to shift, and then it was like, what about all my stuff in the cloud? And of course, I had to pivot and learn about how to download those, how to download the originals, and all that stuff. So I just get really excited at the pivots in life.
Well, absolutely. And I think also to capture that brings forward, as you had said, the story of how did we cope? How did we decide what to do next? Because life does bring challenges. And a lot of times, especially young people, they don't know how to handle it because they've never handled it before. And so when somebody can look back and there was an elder, a grandparent, an uncle, somebody even within the extended family, and there was that moment where they had to make that choice, that decision point. And again, it's like, how did they handle it? And what was the story behind that black and white image or that digital image is the roots of our lives.
That's right.
Yeah. What else would you like to share when it comes to your business, such as a success story or an experience you had with a client where they really felt joy in their heart?
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh. How much time do we have?
10
um,
hours.
Honestly, there's just it's the sigh of relief knowing that their stuff is really safe now. And we make sure that all of our clients choose a platform that really fits their level of technology. And because I'm not just going to organize and archive their stuff, I want to make sure that they can access it and enjoy it and be able to share it. That's really the end game, right? Whether they're going to enjoy it through photo books, a gallery wall, a slideshow, whatever that may be. We do make a lot of also websites for our families so they can really enjoy it in a totally different format and be able to share it. Success stories of our clients is just that we had a client who had a ton of letters. He's an African American, and he had a lot of letters from his past. And we scanned the letters and the photographs, and he donated the letters to the Schoenberg Institute.
He was a
Three,
writer.
yeah, and 3 weeks later, the Schoenberg Institute contacted him and said, your grandfather had another family, and they also donated his letters to us. I mean, like, you can't make this stuff up. I said, oh my God, Tony, I think this is a movie. Like, he wasn't that attached to it because he himself is a historian. He was really interested about who the other family would be and if he has any cousins out there. And but that is just that's just one of many stories. I had another client who had memories from the 1830s. I mean, that's when literally the daguerreotypes were created. And so she had a representation of every type of photograph that ever was. And now, we've archived everything. Everything is in nice archival boxes. And she's moved many times. And that's the first thing she moves are those boxes. Yeah, it's really great. I mean, the stories go on and on. It's really wonderful.
And I think it is important to bring up these reference points because it's more than a name on a tombstone. It's more than a name in a will. And one of the things that we had also chatted about in our icebreaker conversation is when there are affluent families, including celebrities like Robin Williams, he had a couple of different spouses, thus different families. And what did they fight over? They fought over the baseball hat. They didn't fight over the millions when they went to the court. So
Yeah.
I think that to have these, I don't want to call them difficult conversations, but I think they're important conversations, but they bring up a certain level of sentimentality that is much needed because we can't just be news, sports, and weather because we're afraid to bring up the baseball cap or the photo of the baseball cap, or how do we know that we are mortal and yet make the best choices here and now compared to thinking we can put it off another day, we can procrastinate it tomorrow, we can finally bring up the 10 photo albums or the photo box or the microfiche or whatever
Yeah.
format it's in.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned that. I forgot that's what they were fighting over, the baseball cap. You know, it exactly.
Yeah, we're human at the end of the day, and it is those connection moments because somebody can be granted $5 million or 50 million or whatever that number is, but it truly is, like you had brought up in our preamble, it is that connection with other human beings. So
Yes.
for your hardcover coffee table book, what images or stories or life lessons would you like to be in it?
Oh, I always say, excuse me. I always say that I love children and old people. Everyone in the middle, I'd like them, but I want my family. It's my ancestors, my family to be on my hardcover book. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think you mentioned you have 119 family members around the world.
Yep. I have 26 first cousins through my mom. And I have a cousin who's actually a year older than my mother. So my aunt had him, and then a year later, my grandmother had my mom. And so he has his grandkids. And so there's a lot of layers to those 114. But I am very proud to say that I actually know most of them, almost all of them I've met. So I'm very blessed, even though we all live in four continents.
And I think, again, if I go back to this idea of meaning, our life can't just be all work. So to know that you have 114 relatives out there, it just makes, breaking bread one day or the sharing of holiday cards or when there's weddings and different events, bar mitzvahs, funerals, all of those life moments, when we get to evaluate, it just brings so much more than just, work. Because
Yeah.
a life of just work is kind of empty. So, what's the best website before I read out my closing paragraph?
What do you mean? Sorry.
Picturli.com. What's the best website for you?
Oh, so yes, I actually have I've composed a seven-step process to aspire, and maybe give you, some tips about how to archive your photographs. So in order to reach that, and our website and how to contact me, just go on picturelifecurated.com and I'll provide them for you for the show notes as well. But if you go there, you will have access to our website, and yeah, it's just a quick landing page. You can sign up for the seven-step guide. You can book a complimentary consult with me, and so much more.
Wonderful, wonderful. And I know that your service is more on the bespoke side compared to a DIY do it yourself. And I just wanted to share that with the listeners.
Yes, definitely.
Yes.
Hmm.
Okay. It has been a sheer pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you very much for your time this morning. You've brought up a lot of great points, including that question of what is it that you would like to leave for the next 7 generations. So thank you so much for being a guest.
Thank you so much for having me, Angelina. It's been a pleasure.
Wonderful. In closing, I'm Angelina Carleton, the hostess of the Design Your Legacy podcast, as well as the founder of Legacy Planning, a boutique advisory firm based out of Beverly Hills, California, but international in those I coach. I hope to dive deep into subjects that can help a person define, develop, and execute their legacy and continue to scour the landscape for those who can be great resources to every dimension of your legacy. For many listeners, there can never be enough education and preparation in the moat around your castle. Whether you find yourself with new wealth or generational wealth, may the content on this channel be an anchor in any storms ahead. We do our best to provide original content for your intellectual and emotional curiosity. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you're listening on SoundCloud, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts, please remember to rate and review, share with your family and friends. Send an email to either myself or Haleh. And thank you so much for joining us once again this week. And thank you, Haleh, for being a guest.
Thank you.